je jembor to don himi jang zong ne molum jembor ngam ge ta da gar dar ngam zan to shirmar do stomba tu je jan la gi jom zara ne je ro ze ni jang kan sa ja gor tu ji shan lo yela tu jo gong ba shan
The supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we will continue our teaching on the Udāna Sūtra. The Udāna Sūtra consists of a total of 33 chapters. We are currently discussing the very first chapter, which is indeed the chapter on impermanence, a fundamental concept. We may need to spend some more time on the chapter on impermanence. Today is Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday, and the day after tomorrow is Friday. On Friday, we will talk a bit about the analects. It seems like we should have the physical book right here, shouldn't we? I am not sure if we currently possess it. On Friday, we will talk about the analects. Please be informed that there will be no classes this Saturday and Sunday. We will continue our lectures next Monday. Currently, we are engaged in discussing the chapter on impermanence. In the chapter on impermanence, yesterday we already talked about a metaphor at the beginning, using the metaphor of fruit falling to the ground to explain the concept of impermanence. Today I also sent everyone the Udāna Sūtra, translated by Tianxizai in the past, which is called the Essential Verses from the Collection of Dharma. That's what he called it at the time. So sometimes it can be useful for you to make comparisons, particularly because Tianxizai was a profoundly famous translator in history. He previously translated the Bodhicaryavatara, the way of the Bodhisattva, and at that time he translated it as the Sutra on entering the Bodhisattva path. He called it a sutra, not a treatise, but it has been compared before as well. And indeed there are quite a few differences in many important aspects. This Udāna Sūtra, as we can see, is the same. It seems there are also considerable differences. When you are preparing for your oral Dharma examination, if you feel the original translation is easier to understand or more profoundly insightful, you can also refer to this particular version. This is because when Tianxizai passed away, it was around the year 1000 AD. So that's more than 1,000 years ago from this present moment in time. Perhaps the way things were originally expressed back then, including some specific Chinese terms and phrases, was somewhat different. I originally thought to myself I would try to teach from Tianxizai's translation, especially when it comes to the chapter on impermanence, and for the most part it can be matched up. But when it comes to the details, if we explain this concept according to Master Jikai's commentary, there are many places that might not be easy to explain. That's why it was retranslated, so we can also compare the different versions. Today we will continue our discussion of the chapter on impermanence from the Venerable Udāna Sūtra. There are several insightful metaphors mentioned here. There was a metaphor earlier, and there will be more metaphors discussed later on.
Bernard zamim kambo yin jimba le no shi ba tamchit tamrin jigbar dar marnam chukyan devjin no.
For example, the potter mixes clay to make vessels. In the end, everything is destined to break, and human life is the same. Here the first metaphor is, for instance, the potter who makes pottery, the craftsman, the ceramicist. Whether he makes bottles, bowls, or any other vessels made from clay, he first mixes various types of earth together, and only after carefully mixing does he then actually begin to craft them, no matter how well you meticulously make them. In the end, everything will be destroyed. Everything means not a single one will remain. All of them will be ruined. Human life is the same for those of us living in this world. Human life is no exception. All human lives are subject to this universal principle. In the end, everything must also be abandoned and will eventually depart from existence. The vast number of people inhabiting our planet at this moment number approximately 7 billion individuals. Although there weren't nearly as many people in the past, no matter what diverse kinds of people there are in the world, in fact, human life is also inherently impermanent. If we look at the entire global population, perhaps, for example, in some of our history books, or among certain great masters in Buddhism, for example, the revered Kadampa Deshek, he lived approximately 900 years ago from now. If we look at the human population at that time, it should have been a relatively small amount. Some statistical books often say that at that particular time, in their historical accounts, the total human population in the world was less than 300 million. So in Tibet, we now have 6 million people, almost 7 million nowadays. The biography of Kadampa Deshek, including the Dujom History of Buddhism and Khenpo Akyong's biography, all of these sources state that when he held the Posada ceremony, 1.8 million monks gathered together. During the Posada, the red and yellow colors of the monastic robes seemed to dye the very sky itself. Of course, this might very well be the case, either a pure vision of great masters and accomplished beings, and there are different interpretations about this. If we talk about the actual number of people, it might be a bit difficult because nowadays, for example, back then the city of London, England, had a population of less than 30,000 people, and there are indeed such historical records. So even about 50 years ago from now, at that particular time, the total human population in the entire world was, if I recall correctly, just over 3 billion individuals. So in these past 50 or 60 years, the world population has expanded rapidly. I'm not sure where I just started talking about this from. But in other words, all people, if we look at everyone in the world today, in reality there isn't a single person who doesn't die. Everyone will ultimately die. This particular verse's background story tells us that at that time, the Buddha, together with his devoted retinue, went to a forest called Anjana and remained there together with his entire retinue. Later, probably in the early morning, they departed from that place. The retinue went out together to beg for alms. During the alms round, they saw someone, it seemed to be a place called Barao Doza or something like that, where a 120-year-old elder had passed away. Then they saw that a 7-year-old child had also tragically died. And then these people, they placed the two lifeless bodies on a solemn platform together, and everyone present was crying very sadly. This included their close relatives and dear friends, who were all weeping uncontrollably as well. Later, at a certain designated place, Ananda respectfully laid out a seat for the Buddha and humbly invited him to turn the profound Dharma wheel. Then the Buddha began to teach the sacred Dharma. All phenomena are inherently impermanent and unstable. Even great arhats, much like the mighty sal tree, the Buddha and the Shravakas ultimately also manifest impermanence. Then the Buddha gave an analogy. Once, when the human lifespan was 80,000 years, a wheel-turning king appeared in the world. At that time, there was a magnificent tree in his garden. Underneath the tree, there are 500 young Brahmin youths. Enjoyed all kinds of worldly pleasures together. Among them, there was one Brahmin youth who went to a quiet, secluded place and developed a deep sense of renunciation toward the entire world. Then he began to deeply contemplate. While he was contemplating, he thought to himself, we young Brahmin youths should all renounce the household life together and embrace a life of spiritual devotion and eliminate all defilements completely. Only then can we truly practice the genuine Dharma with pure intention. Then he used some very insightful analogies to illustrate this point, for example, which he should have rightfully shared with the other Brahmin youths. He stated that all life in this world is truly and completely impermanent and fleeting. How is it impermanent? For example, a potter. The pottery he skillfully makes will eventually be completely destroyed as well. A skilled weaver, the fine cloth he carefully weaves, all its intricate warp and weft threads, will eventually come to an end as well. And worldly prisoners on death row, with every step they take, they are drawing closer to death, for example. Water flowing down from a high mountain in constant descent, Just as each individual drop of water will fall to the ground, in the same way a person's life will never return once it passes. Or, for instance, when a young child strikes the surface of the water with a stick, the patterns left behind will also quickly disappear without a trace. In the same way, the lives of all sentient beings are impermanent just like that. These profound truths were taught by the Buddha to those present at that specific time. And the 5 analogies I just mentioned, each individual verse of these 5 analogies was spoken by the Buddha himself at that particular time. This is also how it is explained in our commentaries. In fact, for each and every verse of the analogies presented below, there are also some distinct and different stories deeply associated with them. For example, here it talks about the analogy of the potter. At the time of the king Prasenajit, he specifically asked the skilled potter to make some vessels, but because they were not made on time, just like in Nepal nowadays, if you ask them to make something, it takes a very long time. They don't really have any rules. If something is supposed to be finished in a month, it might take 2 months. At that time, the potter didn't finish the work. Then Prasenajit got angry all of a sudden. He completely destroyed all of the potter's wares. The potter was very scared and deeply distressed, so he went to another, safer place. He diligently started his pottery work there once again. After some time, the king found out about his location again. After discovering this, he destroyed all the potter's wares again. This happened about 3 times in a row. Later, the potter became very anxious. He thought, if I break the king's law again, I might not even be able to keep my very own life. So he went to the Buddha and humbly became a monk. After ordaining, he immediately felt a profound sense of peace, that now everything was peaceful and nothing was wrong. There was nothing at all to worry about. So every day he neither listened to the sacred Dharma nor diligently practiced. He didn't recite sutras or meditate peacefully. He didn't even participate in any of the group activities with the other fellow monks. He just stayed there being lazy all the time. Later, when the Buddha found out, he began to scold this monk. He said, you truly think that now you've successfully escaped the king's law and that you have nothing left to fear. But in reality, that's not the case. We humans face the great calamity of the 5 aggregates. As long as you continue to fully rely on them, the terror of death is even greater. And in the future, you will fall into the 3 lower realms. This kind of fear is far more severe and overwhelming than even the harshest punishment of the king's law. So at that very moment, the compassionate Buddha spoke this verse with great wisdom. Right then and there, that monk immediately attained the precious fruit of sainthood. So there are different versions of this story. As we have just discussed, everyone should be fully aware of this important fact. For example, just yesterday when we observed fruit falling to the ground, after the Buddha witnessed this scene, he began to teach the Dharma on impermanence. And today, seeing the potter, if he is trying to escape there, or just observing the potter's entire and intricate work, he also spoke a profound verse on the nature of impermanence. So sometimes when we truly see and observe all kinds of phenomena in society, just the day before yesterday, I also went to a factory in my hometown that specializes in making pottery. At that time I thought of this analogy, but in my own mind the sense of impermanence did not arise. Instead I felt, wow, these clay pots are really well made. These Dharma protector cups are also very well made. This bowl is also very well made. Indeed, in our local area now, we are currently cooperating on various important projects with the city of Jingdezhen. Seeing these things, actually, we ordinary people might encounter all kinds of analogies about impermanence. However, within our own minds, perhaps nothing really arises either. When we see a piece of pottery, we think, wow, is this potter good looking? How much money does the potter make? We always have a certain kind of attachment to a sense of permanence. But Buddha and these sages are quite different from us, just like an impermanence song by His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, described in The Melodious Sound of the Waterfall, if we are just able to understand it. Objects, sentient beings, and their governing laws are all truly the very best teachings pointing to impermanence. They are proclaiming impermanence to us, are the best teachers for us, whether changing seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter, or the birth, aging, sickness, and death of people, or whether we witness some failures or some prosperities, all of our gains and losses for us are truly ever-present metaphors for the transient nature of existence. For example, today we might clearly hear the distinct sound of a common crow, but later on perhaps our very own voices too. When people in the future hear them, perhaps by that time none of those beautiful birds will even exist anymore on this planet. Sometimes when I listen to His Holiness's teachings, listening to his recordings now because 20 years have passed, His Holiness is no longer with us, and those crows and magpies from back then, the sounds we heard in those recordings, naturally make us feel that all of these are surely gone now. So generation after generation, we keep changing, constantly replacing one another. Therefore, in this particular and important regard, each of us should truly and deeply develop a profound sense of impermanence of all things. Perhaps in ancient times there were many metaphors involving potters, carpenters, and the like. But actually, if we really contemplate impermanence now, for example, the teacup I have today, it looks like it's made of insulated stainless steel. It might be even more robust and resilient than pottery, but in reality, it too is truly subject to impermanence. At a certain point, it will eventually be completely annihilated. In the same way, any single worldly thing, without exception, no matter how very real and solid it seems, no matter how hard or unbreakable it appears, as long as its causes and conditions gradually fade away, there is not a single truly existent phenomenon in the entire world, not a single independent phenomenon. This understanding must arise within us. We must develop a firm conviction in this principle. Only then, as we go through each point below, in the major cases we just discussed, we have already explained the general metaphors for each verse below. However, each of the following points also presents a distinct and different perspective on the subject matter.
Perna tagna jamba la, punna gandang gamchig bu, spunji stang la, zhenba, tugbar tar, murnum chukjang devjan no.
For example, like a loom weaving, inserting the weft threads one by one, eventually comes to an end. Human life is just the same way. Next, the teaching uses the metaphor of a weaving machine here. What does this actually mean to us? For example, whether we are weaving cloth today, or perhaps weaving a sturdy tent, or meticulously weaving other items like belts or shoelaces. In ancient times, everything was entirely made by hand weaving. At that particular time, as everyone knows, during the entire weaving process, aside from the equipment itself, there is always a thread called the warp. The warp is the vertical thread that runs lengthwise.
Cheki workina rjda fund ringa cheki mjokskada cheki chimozon mechi sacha susu yamran tagzing tagne na rjdo yar kharse yon oren funda tivara harsar jagno tazener andina khzu dar fund girtan ko khuyjaner.
There are the warp and the weft threads. The warp is the vertical one. The weft is the thread that goes horizontally, weaving in and out. This is called the weft. So here, when we use a loom properly, it weaves the individual weft thread one by one systematically. When weaving the weft, usually the weft is a compact ball of thread. Then the ball of thread passes back and forth through the middle. Those of you who do this, including people in pastoral areas who make tents, should all be very familiar with this. Maybe those in farming areas, except for doing some simple things, they might not necessarily know about this. Before I had just turned 23 years of age, I grew up entirely in the pastoral area. So every single year when making these black tents, my mother would always meticulously do this. So in this particular regard, but I never actually did it myself. If I were to do it myself, then it's customary for men not to do this. One thing is milking cows. Men can't do it. If a man does it, it means his wife has passed away. Weaving yak hair tents is also something men can't do. If a man does it, in the past, there was someone in our village named Gejia, because he didn't really have any family. He only had an elderly person at home. So every day, he made the tents himself, even though he was a man. I've seen it too. Sometimes I'd go over to his place, and we all thought it was very rare. This is a tent that's woven. But now many of our traditional sturdy and well-crafted yak hair tents are disappearing. They've turned into white tents. White tents are actually quite unattractive. Generally speaking, they're not very suitable for pastoral areas. Maybe that's just a traditional mindset. So when we talk about weaving here, the weft threads inside, each and every one, need to be threaded back and forth, put in place one by one. And when you do it this way, by the end, the entire ball of thread is already completely used up. It seems that, as the notes say, even though they're called weft threads, what it means is there might be differences in the warp threads. Warp and weft, the Earth has lines of longitude and latitude. The equator, the patterns on the Earth, the horizontal ones are called lines of latitude. And the vertical ones are called lines of longitude. Like latitude this and that, longitude this and that. Everyone is familiar with this. And then speaking of the weft, when you eventually reach the end of the process, your ball of thread is completely used up. Or with the warp, in the end, you can't even open it up at all. At this point, if that is indeed the case, actually, human life is very much the same way. Even though in the middle there are days passing by, one after another, just like the intricate weft threads weaving back and forth again and again, endlessly. A person's lifespan is being used up day by day, but as you keep using it, in the end, it's all completely gone now. Just like how the intricate weaving process was finished much earlier than anticipated. Actually, this koan, at that particular time, when the Buddha was residing in the city of Shravasti, he observed a family engaged in the intricate process of weaving, and in a short period of time their work was entirely completed. After the weaving task concluded, the Buddha then recited this verse in Jikai's commentary. Only this much is mentioned. I saw in some other commentaries it is said that in the distant past there was also a particular person who was quite skillful at the traditional art of weaving, and his son could also weave. But the son had a special personality. His son was a bit lazy and very slow in his actions and responses. He did everything slowly, taking his time with everything. His father became a bit anxious. He said that whatever you do, you should finish it as quickly as possible, so that you can do other things as well. Later, between the father and son, some conflicts arose, and their views were always different. Afterwards, it seemed the son was just like young people nowadays. He just couldn't accept it, and eventually died of anger. After he died of anger, the father deeply and profoundly regretted it. He felt that because of this intricate weaving work, he had neglected his son. He had carelessly lost his son. He was filled with remorse and had the deep and profound regret of losing a beloved child. Later, he went to the Buddha to become a monk. Actually, in front of the Buddha back then, at that very moment, all kinds of people could become monks. In the end, the Buddha also agreed. Now, some governments often say, you have all kinds of different people here. Even individuals who have made a very small mistake, they say, among you monks, you have such people, you know. There are all kinds of people. But actually, this isn't just about monks. Human beings themselves are very complex. It's not just us monks. Even amongst lay people, even those at the very highest levels of society, if you really look deeply into it, there are many significant problems as well. As long as it's a group of ordinary people, it's unlikely to be perfect. Even during the time when the Buddha was alive, just now, that weaver failed and his son died. Afterwards, he truly regretted it. After feeling regret, he became a monk under the guidance of the Buddha. However, even after formally ordaining, this individual still couldn't truly let go within his heart. As a monk, he thought about his son every day. Every day he just couldn't let it go. After that, he didn't recite scriptures, nor did he ever truly practice or deeply reflect upon his actions. He also didn't participate in the affairs of the monastic community. Later, when the Buddha learned about this, he began to teach the principle of impermanence in front of many people. Human life is inherently impermanent, and there is truly nothing to regret. He thoughtfully used the analogy of weaving to explain the principle of impermanence. Later, this very person, the monk who had been feeling deeply regretful and utterly heartbroken just a moment ago, also attained the esteemed state of sainthood. So using this particular kind of analogy to thoroughly explain the concept, actually, weaving is also a spiritual way like this, and through it, one can clearly understand that all worldly phenomena are indeed impermanent. In fact, many of us may not practice well enough, but if our practice is genuinely good, it might not be exactly what we currently see right now. Whether it's intricate weaving or pottery, these artistic creations may not seem like much at first glance, but if the Buddha were to appear in this era, perhaps what the Buddha would see and the analogies he would use would probably be different. For example, some of us have our phones break, some have their computers break, and some have their cars break down. So the Buddha might casually say, there was someone driving an old, rather worn-out Jeep, and it broke down, unable to move on the road. Actually, there was a Lama at our institute, you see, who had a Jeep, and it broke down all the time, especially on the road. Once, when he was picking up His Holiness, the other drivers told him to come at the end, so the old Lama came last. They were afraid his car would break down on the road and cause a traffic jam. That Lama really thought, so-and-so said I should come last because I'm the old Lama. Because if the car in front broke down, I would have to fix it. In the end, his car really did break down at the back. So their idea about him was actually correct. So if the Buddha had seen him back then, he might have used this as an analogy as well. Sometimes the water in our toilet won't go down. Or just like what was mentioned earlier, the old tape recorder suddenly breaks, or the washing machine unexpectedly breaks down, or perhaps the water faucet in the hotel room unexpectedly breaks down. For these kinds of things, perhaps the Buddha could use each one as an analogy. So actually, in our present-day lives, not all analogies necessarily have to be derived from ancient times. By extension, there are indeed many such relevant analogies. The Buddha also said in the sutras, why did he use analogies like this? The reason for using so many analogies is this. Beings have different capacities and backgrounds. For example, if I am a textile worker, as long as there is a relevant analogy related to the intricate work of textile production, I will immediately understand the concept of impermanence. If I am a potter, as soon as an analogy about pottery is mentioned, I will immediately understand. If I am just a simple, humble herder, as soon as an analogy about herding is given, I will immediately understand. If I am someone who plants trees, like the analogy we discussed yesterday about ripe fruit falling, I will immediately understand this kind of analogy. So it may seem that in the sutras, there are often many different analogies. But these different analogies are meant for different kinds of beings. For example, for those of us who are outsiders, it might seem like these analogies aren't particularly good. For instance, if we've never been potters ourselves, the analogies about pottery, they don't really resonate with us. But if I myself were a potter, then as soon as this analogy is mentioned, it would feel familiar to me and I would immediately relate to it. This is also the primary reason why so many different analogies are frequently used. This is the second analogy. Earlier, in the previous section, there were several analogies, all just appearing at once in that particular case study. For example, a condemned prisoner, every step he takes brings him ever closer to the execution ground. Human life, in its essence, is just like that. This concept is easy to understand on the surface. I think everyone present here shouldn't have any problem with this concept. Yesterday, I listened to some of your oral Dharma examinations here. Overall, they were actually pretty good indeed. But you still need to project your voice. It seems like the men over here are a bit reluctant to speak up. Not to mention the people next to you. No matter how they listen, they can't hear you clearly. So whether it's giving a presentation or debating, at these crucial times, you should truly try to bring out your inherent potential or your profound wisdom. That would certainly be much better. Normally, when we speak, our voices are quite strong and incredibly powerful. But when it comes to giving presentations, overall it's still okay. But some flexibility and sensitivity are still lacking. There should be a bit more of that. Maybe it's because the people I'm used to are a bit different. Let's not talk about that. Next, here's another analogy. If someone breaks the law in a serious manner and is eventually sentenced to death by the judicial system, that's what is actually called a prisoner. As for the character itself, you see, what is more, it depicts a person locked inside a house. This comes from ancient oracle bone script. There are many such metaphors in Chinese, including the moon and the sun, the earth, and many others also use this kind of metaphor. For example, when it comes to people, humans have 2 legs. These significant differences are distinctly reflected in the unique shapes of the characters. Take a poignant prisoner, for instance. When he is taken to the execution ground, with every single deliberate step he takes, he is actually getting 1 step closer to the ultimate punishment of the death sentence. 1 crucial step closer, he puts 1 foot down, then deliberately lifts the other, moving with a slow pace. He puts his foot down completely, then lifts it up again. Every single step that he takes brings him ever closer to his inevitable and ultimate death. He should be feeling more and more terrified, getting closer and closer to the actual execution ground. Actually, human life is indeed exactly the very same. No matter if we are enjoying meal, taking a stroll, or simply living through the present day and then the subsequent tomorrow, each passing day brings us a little bit closer to the ultimate certainty of death. For example, if an individual is generally expected to live to the age of 80 years, that's a period of 80 years, with each one of those 365 days in each year passing by, meaning that 1 less day is remaining in your original lifespan. So in this particular way, we inevitably get closer and closer to the end. That's why, nowadays, some death row inmates internationally, that is, people who have been sentenced to death for their crimes, only in Japan are they specifically not told the exact execution date in advance. Generally, the international practice is, for example, if someone is sentenced to death while they're in prison, they must be informed that they have been sentenced to death. This is something they must know themselves. This is the standard practice under international law. But as for the final exact date, the Japanese generally do not allow it to be disclosed. They have their own set of rules. But in many other countries around the world, for example, if I only have half a month left to live in prison, they will inform the person in advance and make it clear. They'll tell you, you have half a month left. The person can count and keep track of everything they do each day. But in Japan, it's widely said that those particular prisoners are even more profoundly afraid. Just when the prison guards come over to their cells, they experience a deep sense of dread. They feel like they might be taken to the execution ground at any moment, and they're terrified. So for us humans, in reality, it's just that we can't see it ourselves. If we could really actually see it, maybe we wouldn't even have any particular interest in actually eating during the course of the day, or any interest at all in even sleeping any longer at night. Everyone is inevitably and certainly approaching their ultimate death. It's exactly the same fundamental principle at play here as well. As for this particular case of his, at that time, the powerful king Ajatasattu caught some notorious thieves who had been causing trouble and handed them over to the executioner, the individual person who carries out the act of killing or putting someone to death. It seems that this was the custom in India at the time, that when someone was sentenced to death, they would wear flower garlands on their heads. And then, when they were about to be executed, the Buddha had already noticed this. After discovering it, the Buddha released all of these people because the Buddha had a relatively good relationship with King Ajatasattu. King Ajatasattu, didn't he also brutally kill his very own father, the revered King Bimbisara? And even when he was quite young, there was that significant matter where a wise sage knew that he truly owed him a life debt from a previous life, a debt that transcended time, and that when he grew up, he would definitely kill him. At that time, King Bimbisara, when he was young, threw him from a tall building to the ground. But because of his karmic force, only one of his fingers was slightly injured. He did not, in fact, die. In the very beginning, King Bimbisara and King Ajatasattu had a very close relationship. But later, Devadatta started sowing discord between them. He said, "When you were little, your father deliberately tried to kill you. Look closely, you are clearly missing a finger." This unfortunate incident was caused back then. Later, after asking around, he found out the truth. From then on, he tried every possible way, and in the end, he cruelly locked him up in a desolate prison cell, then tragically starved his own father to death. In the origin chapter at the beginning of the Contemplation Sutra, we have already explained this very clearly. In the end, the Buddha also compassionately taught him the profound Dharma. Later, although he eventually attained the sacred fruit of stream entry, still, after he tragically killed his father, the king, he also killed many other people. After all this, he later repented in front of the Buddha. The Unborn Resentment King Sutra was also composed about this incident. So at that time, the Buddha released these people. He released those who had been sentenced to death. In fact, when the Buddha himself observed the scene at that very moment, the condemned prisoner was slowly walking step by step towards his fate. Because of this, he naturally recited this sacred verse. This is what is explained in our commentary. I have also seen other commentaries. When the Buddha was residing at the Jetavana monastery at that particular time, King Prasenajit also captured several notorious thieves. When he was about to sentence them to death, one of them escaped successfully. Then he went on to become a monk. After ordaining, he escaped death. The Buddha also agreed at that time. Later, it seemed that this person did not practice diligently either. He did not study the 3 trainings and did not practice properly. After the Buddha learned about this, he began to say, you shouldn't think that just because you don't have to face the death penalty now, everything is fine. In fact, an even more terrifying death is the cycle of samsara. If you continue like this within samsara, then you will never experience any happiness in life after life. After the Buddha had explained it in this particular way, that monk later attained full realization as well. So at that time, the Buddha then recited this verse. Of course, the Buddha may have in different places and in front of different audiences, it may appear to be the same verse. But in different places, for example, between King Ajatashatru and himself, when they were having such exchanges, the Buddha also recited this verse. When Anathapindika was conversing with King Prasenajit, the Buddha also recited this verse. Perhaps at that time, although it was the same verse, even though it was just one verse, in different situations and in front of different people, it is very likely that the Buddha would recite such a verse. So what is the main point we are discussing here? Our human lives are just like yaks in a slaughterhouse, or like people on death row. In fact, nowadays, there are still a great many people in the world who are sentenced to death. The number is especially large. You may have seen related news reports as well. In some countries around the world, even though someone has indeed broken the law, the death penalty is not allowed. There are many countries like this, but there are also many other countries where the offenses committed are not that serious, yet the death penalty is still imposed. For example, when it comes to corruption and embezzlement nowadays, some people have embezzled huge amounts, but they are not sentenced to death, while others seem to have taken much less, yet they still receive the death penalty. There are all sorts of complex and challenging situations. There may be all kinds of other significant reasons for this as well. We simply cannot speculate about them. Many issues in politics are narrow in scope and also involve secret relationships. Generally speaking, not to mention us ordinary people, it's very hard to judge these things by law. Legally, there are actually very clear regulations, but for some matters, special circumstances are handled in special ways. So in these particular situations, it is important to consider enforcing the law. According to the law is certainly possible in some specific cases, but at other times, it's truly exceedingly difficult to achieve. Next, as I mentioned earlier among the 5 analogies, the third one is finished.
Devshin mi tsenro warlar nar dokban yerwa men.
Like a torrent rushing down a cliff, flowing away and never returning, so too is human life. Once gone, it never comes back. Here he's also using a metaphor. For example, on a rugged and imposing mountain, there might be a steep and treacherous cliff, and in these specific places, the water flows with incredible speed and immense fierceness. It rushes on without stopping. Because if we're talking about water flowing on flat ground, it looks much slower. The speed isn't that fast. But in some of the world's truly famous and remarkable places, like the impressive and powerful waterfalls in Canada and also in Guizhou, which also boasts a very famous waterfall, these the impressive ones that gracefully cascade down from the towering mountains, including those we encountered on our journey towards Mekong, specifically at Lhasa, there is also a charming and somewhat smaller waterfall present there. Would you consider that a true waterfall? I suppose you could. And over in Jiarong, there are some as well. These particular kinds of streams are quite rapid and notably swift in their flow. Human life is just the same, much like a fleeting moment. Once it's gone, once it has vanished, it never, ever comes back again. Truly irreplaceable. In our commentary, There are indeed literal explanations for all of this. A person's entire life, in reality, truly passes moment by moment, constantly, without ever stopping. It just keeps on continually flowing away. Human life, Buddha also mentioned in some of his sutras and profound teachings, is just a matter of a single breath. So in this particular story, the Buddha took Ananda along. Actually, it should be Nanda here. It seems it wasn't Ananda, but Nanda. Together with Nanda, at a specific location known as Malaya, or perhaps a similar majestic mountain range, there was a waterfall. When the Buddha observed this scene, he recited this profound verse. After observing how incredibly fast the water was rushing powerfully, he thoughtfully used it as a profound metaphor for the fleeting nature of human life. There is yet another compelling story. It involves a diverse group of people who were playing together by a river when suddenly the river flooded completely. It seems like just very recently, not long ago in fact. In addition to other weather-related events, there was also flooding in Beijing. More than 30 people died as well, in fact. That's precisely what the news also reported too. In such dire situations, many people were tragically swept away. Among those individuals, some had parents, wives, children, and so forth and so on. Many people were tragically swept away and unfortunately died. There was one person who was probably frightened by the natural disaster at the time and also didn't really know what might have possibly happened at home. He immediately ran to the Buddha to become a monk, and after being formally ordained, he felt that there was nothing major left to worry about. Actually, in the past, some monks really were like this. They just simply mixed into the Buddhist community for a living. As long as one is a monk for a day, one rings the bell for a day. As long as each day passes, that's enough for them. Because they rely on the offerings from the faithful, they have food and drink, so they don't have to worry about food or clothing. They just continue living like this. Later on, it was the same as what was mentioned earlier. They never truly put in significant effort or whatsoever. The Buddha began to sternly reprimand them. Although you have successfully survived the disaster of the flood the first time, the true disaster of the flood of samsara, in reality, you have not overcome. If you do not strive diligently in this way, then in the vast and boundless ocean of samsara, in the future, there will be even more profound terrors and so on. After hearing this, that bhikshu also felt ashamed and then diligently practiced himself and eventually attained the ultimate fruit of arhatship. Actually, some people nowadays, it is thought that a person's fate is already predetermined, but that's not really the case. Later, in the Udāna Sūtra, in the 17th chapter, it also talks about this topic. At that time, the Buddha saw some elderly individuals, and he said that if they had been diligent back then, they could have achieved worldly success and become great kings. If they had been diligent in the spiritual path, they could have become arhats, the highest attainment. If you do not possess this kind of diligence, but only a medium or a lesser degree of diligence, then you might become a suitable king or a minister, and so on. And if you are diligent in spiritual practice, then you can also attain the fruit of arhatship, or the stage of stream enterer, and so on. But if you are not diligent in anything at all, because of this very reason, your final outcome now is extremely miserable, left to lament helplessly in vain. In the end, he said that people are just like a lake. When the lake completely dries up, it's very pitiful indeed, because there is a kind bird called the egret there. Some of these poor, unfortunate egrets are just there, waiting, unable to fly, simply waiting for death. Now, among us humans too, some people, because they were not sufficiently diligent when they were young. Didn't we talk about youth yesterday? We are all quite young people indeed. There was a Khenpo who said that from now on, no one will ever dare to say they are old again anymore. Didn't we talk about this specific topic before, about the great master Faxian? At that time, some said he was 65, others said he was 63. It was at that age that he began his journey, went abroad and diligently learned foreign languages. That should have been around the year 399. He started from Chang'an, crossed the vast Xinjiang desert and continued his travels. He arrived in India and visited more than 30 countries. Later, he learned Sanskrit and brought back the Dharma. He returned by successfully crossing the vast sea. Consequently, some people began studying foreign languages when they're 63 years old, studying English, French, German. Many of us feel that we are old once we reach 40 or even 30 years. So now each of us should truly have this kind of mindset. Perhaps then we will gradually develop a profound sense of diligence. What was I actually just saying just now? At that time, the Buddha said that some people believe that they cannot succeed at anything. And in the very end, when they grow old, they truly gain absolutely nothing. So they lament in vain. In general, in Tang Dynasty poetry, poets of the Tang Dynasty often used words with a tone of sorrow. Indeed, they often used such expressions. I just mentioned this here as well. As for our lifespan, in reality, it has definitively not been restored or extended. The crucial main point here is this. This inherent lifespan cannot possibly be extended. Nowadays, many people genuinely believe that human lifespan can be extended or that life itself can be prolonged. It's similar to when you put fresh meat or crisp vegetables into the refrigerator. You want to freeze them for a while. Nowadays, many people believe, including what's called age-freezing men and age-freezing women. Both men and women seem to keep their youth frozen, maintaining their youthful appearance temporarily. But in fact, as we've mentioned in our commentary, this kind of youth simply cannot be preserved, no matter if you undergo a cosmetic facelift or have extensive surgical interventions or diligently try all sorts of different methods. In reality, it just gets worse and worse. I think this analogy is quite accurate. For example, if we place a fresh vegetable in the refrigerator, it may visually appear as though it hasn't aged at all, but once you thoroughly heat it up, it will spoil even much faster than usual. So nowadays, when we use technology and chemicals and all kinds of devices to do these things, it actually makes things even worse. Now, in the United States, many people truly believe that utilizing the blood and cells of young individuals is a viable approach. And if you inject them into the body, you can stay forever young, as if you won't get wrinkles or gray hair and so on. But in reality, it's impossible. It's only temporary. It's just like putting something in the fridge, just storing it. But when you reach that age, you still can't preserve it. Some things are just wishful thinking. There's nothing you can do. People have always believed that youth is the best. Perhaps it's better for us to follow the Buddhist perspective. At different stages of life, there is a different kind of beauty, a different quality. There is a kind of inner cultivation, a kind of inner virtue that is the most beautiful. Otherwise, when it comes to your physical body, your blood, and your very own cells, if you do some chemical or physical treatments, it's only a temporary effect in front of others. So now in some large hospitals, they often do things like cell replacement, blood transfusions, or replacing the essential fluids within your body. And then they charge a high price for it. But in reality, many people truly long to preserve their youthful appearance, and so they continue to undergo these cosmetic procedures. But in fact, this is absolutely impossible. Some of these things, aside from wasting money, may not have much meaning at all. So people in the world really do not understand the profound concept of impermanence. When we chat with other people in our daily lives, we often notice, oh, this person really doesn't have even the slightest sense of impermanence. Ordinary people who don't study Buddhism haven't received this education. This is something we understand. But as Buddhists, especially who study Mahayana Buddhism, and even some who are very highly learned, indeed, the actions of those people, maybe it's just that we ourselves are more pessimistic. Oh, but truly, when it comes to their lives, can they really last that long in practice? There are many such doubts. So here, this is also the fundamental principle being discussed. Life is difficult and brief, filled with various sufferings, swiftly heading toward destruction, like traces drawn in water. If we obtain a human body, it is extremely rare and precious. It's not something that's easily achieved. Only through accumulating merit and practicing virtuous deeds can we attain it. The rarity of a human body, it's not so easy to come by. So after obtaining a human body, does it last forever? No, it doesn't. At most, we live to be 100 years old. It is fleeting and short-lived. It cannot truly last forever, even though it absolutely cannot last forever. If we could always be genuinely happy, that would be perfectly fine. But actually, that's not really the case either. It is filled with all kinds of suffering, suffering of change, There is also the suffering of change, the pain of separation from loved ones, and all suffering accumulates. Moreover, this body that experiences such suffering is impermanent by nature and can very easily be destroyed in a short period of time. It's much like when we forcefully strike the surface of the water with a stick or slap the water with our palm. A ripple pattern suddenly appears, but in a very short time it returns to normal. And the delicate pattern leaves absolutely no discernible trace. In the same way, our fleeting human life is inherently impermanent. Now, regarding this particular story, the Buddha, along with some of his devoted followers, went to the bank of the sacred Ganges River. When they arrived at the riverside, they saw some children happily playing nearby, striking the water with sticks. At that moment, some patterns began to appear on the surface of the water. After the Buddha observed this scene, he recited this profound verse. Therefore, it is clear that all phenomena in this world are not really worth holding on to or clinging to, because human life, is just like this. You see, it is short, full of suffering, and easily destroyed. Impermanence inevitably brings loss, and where there is loss, there is no happiness. Isn't this also stated in the 400 verses on the middle way? Impermanence is associated with loss. And if there is any loss, then there is absolutely no true happiness. Therefore, it is said that all that is inherently impermanent is a source of suffering. This is because impermanence will certainly and inevitably bring about harm. If there is harm, there can be no happiness. So all that is impermanent is not joyful. Now some people say, Buddhism says that life is suffering, I don't feel suffering, my family is happy. Even though impermanent, I don't see it, I'm living very happily here. I haven't been sick for a very extended period of time, but that's only a temporary state of affairs. In the end, impermanence is inevitable. And when impermanence comes, there is no happiness to be found. This includes, among the people we see, the most successful, the most beautiful, the wealthiest, and the most powerful people. In the very end, none of them can truly escape the inevitable blow of impermanence. Ultimately, everyone will inevitably suffer some form of loss. And when that loss comes, no one doesn't experience suffering, especially for ordinary people. When they experience such a significant loss, the suffering they endure is quite extreme. Unlike some practitioners in ancient times, who, when faced with such suffering, could immediately transform it into an integral part of their spiritual path. Most people simply can't do that. So our lives are actually very short. In this brief and precious lifetime, we should strive to do something truly meaningful. That particular day, many of us unexpectedly had to leave the monastery rather abruptly. When they were leaving, I spoke to them, especially some Dharma teachers, Khenpos and Khenmos, who are capable in spreading Dharma and benefiting sentient beings, those more accomplished in various aspects. I told them, you should still go out and quickly teach the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. Otherwise, you are already in your 40s or 50s now. At most, you might have only about 10 or 20 years left to spread the Dharma and benefit others. Once you reach your 70s or 80s, except for a very few exceptional people, it's basically not possible anymore. Nowadays, when people in the world reach their 60s, they start to retire one after another, except for a few cases in the West, where some people might still be working in their 70s or 80s. There are such cases. So we Buddhists are the same exact way. Don't think, I'll just focus on listening and contemplating the teachings for now. But in reality, the results of your listening and contemplation, if you truly want to benefit sentient beings, are not necessarily as you imagine. Earlier, when some people had a lifespan of 80,000 years, they still studied impermanence. Even that young boy, when his lifespan was 80,000 years, he still felt that life was impermanent. I think living 80,000 years would be pretty good. We might not necessarily think we're going to die right away. But if even they believe that life is impermanent, nowadays people live to be 100 years old. It's almost unheard of for people to live to 100. In a single village, there are hardly any true centenarians. When people reach the age of over 70 years old, generally speaking in the West, because modern health science is relatively advanced, once people are over 60, there are only a very few who are just starting their careers, just a very small number. Most people are not like that. So we might think to ourselves, it's better to study more while we're young, and later on, spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. But actually, if you count with your own fingers, if, let's say, I assume I can live another 20 years, how old exactly would I be then? At that particular time, what could my peers truly accomplish? So sometimes I really do feel this particular way, that in life it seems like we never really mature at the beginning. For example, nowadays world, people are still studying when they're in their 30s. Then there's the saying, at 30, one stands firm. At 40, one has no doubts. By their 40s, 50s, or even after 60, some people's physical and psychological constitution differs. Some age quickly. At times like this, if you really want to accomplish something, when the time is right and the conditions are ripe, you have to act, especially when it comes to benefiting sentient beings. For each of us living in this world, after studying Mahayana Buddhism, we have a certain responsibility. Even if it's just planting a virtuous and positive seed in the mind stream of a single individual, if you are able to accomplish that, it is profoundly meaningful and beneficial for everyone involved. Next, like a shepherd with his staff drives animals to their pen, sickness and old age, also drive people toward death. It's like some herdsmen, when they herd sheep, cattle or horses, any kind of livestock across the fields, the herdsman skillfully drives these animals, cows, sheep, but in the analogy, the stories always use cows. For the character Chu, animal, it might be better to pronounce it as Chu. So he drives these animals along the path to their final destination, that is, safely into their cattle pens, sheepfolds, or stables. He always holds a stick or staff. When we used to herd cattle, nowadays we use a throwing rope called udu. Udu is the rope we use to throw stones. It's called a throwing rope, you know. In our costumes this year, we specifically included this particular item. When we herd cattle, we usually use a throwing rope, which is also known as a lasso. If we use a stick to drive them, it's like the cattle in farming areas. That's what it's called. When a herder drives their cattle, the closer they gradually get, the nearer they are to the designated place where they are kept. The nearer they are to their destination. It's the same principle with people. Illness and old age are just like the herder and the staff we mentioned earlier. So, what exactly do they bring people to? To the Lord of Death. This is also clearly explained in the commentary. For example, old age is indeed the herder, and illness is the staff he holds. I remember that this very particular metaphor, why is it explained this way? Generally, because the herder consistently uses this method to drive the livestock directly to their own intended destination. So, for us humans, our natural aging process, this process of human aging, and at the same time when we have some serious illnesses. When these two conditions come together, people are usually brought to the presence of the Lord of Death after their earthly journey. As for the story behind this, it was also when the Buddha was in Shravasti at that time. He observed a herder grazing his cattle, and while he was tending to his flock, he was holding a sturdy stick, grasping a staff. This particular metaphor is also quite clearly present. In our commentary, it is described in this straightforward manner. In the Udāna Sūtra, or perhaps another scripture, at that time the Buddha went out together with Ananda. When they went out together, they saw a herder tending over 1,000 cattle out in the field. They saw that among this herd of cattle they were eating and drinking together, fighting with each other, harming each other. The Buddha said actually these particular cattle are quite truly pitiful. There used to be even more animals in this very herd, in fact. Over 500 of them have already died, all of them. But the ones that remain have no idea at all. They still continue to go on hurting and killing each other. Usually, when cattle are gathered together in a large herd, they frequently fight and aggressively clash with each other in a display of dominance. Actually, humans are the same way. Many of us have already died due to various causes and conditions. Those who haven't died yet are still fighting internally. This is also very frightening. So after the Buddha recited this verse at that time, more than 200 people truly attained a state of spiritual enlightenment. From this analogy, we can also see, for example, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In reality, so many people have died. So many people have died on the battlefield. The rest of them are still engaged in a fierce struggle. But once the fighting has concluded, whether you emerge victorious or suffer defeat, what do you truly acquire from such a conflict? There is basically nothing. Even those who started these wars, whether it's Putin or Zelensky, even if they truly indeed achieve a complete and final victory, what do they actually get? In the immensely long history of humanity, perhaps they are merely attached to a certain bit of fame or something else. Sometimes we truly feel that the manner in which human beings act is even more foolish than animals. It seems like there is some kind of personal gain involved, but this so-called gain is illusory and insubstantial and ultimately meaningless. Many precious lives are completely disregarded, subjected to slaughter. It's truly quite pitiful. So sometimes when we observe these analogies, it becomes clear the Buddha also spoke about them in other sutras. Some of the Buddha's teachings are stern condemnations. Some distinguish things with wisdom, and some concepts are explained through various metaphors. But these metaphors are often used to awaken people from their spiritual slumber. So when we look at the world around us, at cows, horses, and the like, we are often like animals ourselves, but we regard animals as the most foolish beings in existence in this entire world. But in a certain profound sense, we human beings are even more foolish than mere animals. Why exactly is that? We have an even clumsier way of doing things. We can create all kinds of machines to kill each other, and destroy all sorts of weapons, and these weapons are used to kill others. We ourselves among each other. We have no sense of compassion at all. So, in a certain sense, the conflicts between people are no different from the conflicts between animals. Sometimes we see two yaks fighting, and in the end, both fall to the ground and die. In fact, humans are the same on the battlefield, all for the sake of gaining a reputation or benefit, especially those who go to the battlefield. They are all indeed the children of ordinary people. The children of high-ranking officials and wealthy tycoons, not a single one of them will ever go to the battlefield. So sometimes those who command these wars should be considered in the entire history of humanity among the most truly evil and heinous criminals. Even though they have not yet been formally sentenced, they will most definitely be judged in the next life. I probably shouldn't say that, otherwise Vladimir Putin might get upset, and that wouldn't be good. Like a trickle of water flowing day and night without rest. Human life is also gradually exhausted, and life returns to destruction. Just like a small stream constantly flowing in the summertime. Or in much larger major rivers like the mighty Yellow River or the expansive Yangtze, they might not completely dry up right away, but the smaller creeks, the little tributaries will, in a very short time, especially during the summer months, they tend to dry up very quickly. And once they completely dry up, even though they flow day and night without stopping, in the end, even though the flowing stream never truly stops day or night, in reality it will also inevitably dry up in a very short period of time. In the same way, a person's entire lifespan will also be completely exhausted within a very short period of time. The commentary says that a person's body, including their possessions, the food and drink they consume, will also disappear in a very, very short time. When our bodies truly reach a certain point, there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. No matter how much you want to live longer, there's helpless. We often see those elderly people. Today, when I was just coming down the stairs, someone actually told me to patiently wait for an elderly person to arrive. So I waited for a very long time, but they didn't show up at all. That person kept fooling me, saying that they're almost here. They kept me waiting, but it didn't work out. Then I said, let's both go up. We went to a far place. And only then did they slowly come down. I was still a bit better off than him when I went up. I went up and met him for a moment, and then he came down. Actually, when a person reaches a certain age, even walking a distance of 100 meters can take a very long time. So a person's lifespan and body, especially the body and material resources, get exhausted. After material resources are depleted, life, which depends on them, is eventually lost. In the end, it all leads to destruction. Zhuangzi said, "Life is a temporary lodging, death is a return home." He meant that being alive is actually just temporary. Just like when we stay in a hotel, just like staying one night temporarily, death is ultimately a person's final destination. That is truly returning home. But according to Confucianism, when a person dies, it is considered returning home, and then nothing more. However, in Buddhism, one might temporarily return but can also come out and travel again. There is still a continuation of life. So after a person dies, it is not the absolute end. As for this, when the Buddha was in Shravasti, he spoke to his devoted disciples, teaching them about the impermanence and the inherent brevity of human life. At that time, a powerful demon king debated with the Buddha, saying that life is not impermanent, that life is very much like a constantly turning wheel, always in motion. Then the Buddha used the profound metaphor of a flowing stream to explain his teachings to those attentive disciples present at that significant time. After the disciples heard the Buddha's insightful verse, they all attained realization. So for us now, even though it was more than 2,500 years ago, each of these verses is a verse of profound enlightenment. Now, more than 2,500 years later, no matter how many verses we have heard, not only do we not become truly enlightened, but if we become even more attached to the idea of permanence, that's a bit troublesome, but there's nothing we can do about it. The Buddha is no longer here, and we don't even know whom to turn to for help. Actually, during the Buddha's time, at the time of fruition, there truly were many people with sharp faculties. With just a slight nudge or a gentle direct pointing, they would immediately become enlightened. In fact, those arhats at that time, when they attained enlightenment, it was the Buddha who spoke, of course. The speaker was the Buddha. But his words were just like that. It's the same with our precious Dzogchen teachings. The Vidyadharas and accomplished masters of that time were truly remarkable, but the direct pointing instructions they gave back then were also concise teachings. I think that every verse about impermanence is actually a direct pointing method of the Sutrayana, and many of the foundations for enlightenment in the Sutrayana can also be understood through these verses. So if we contemplate them repeatedly ourselves, even if we don't truly attain enlightenment, it should still greatly help us in understanding the nature of our own mind. It should be of great benefit, I think, especially for us, although this is a teaching from the Sutrayana. Praying to the Guru in daily life, these are very important. I saw in the biography of Khenpo Achang that it is also mentioned that in this world those to whom we owe the greatest kindness are first our parents and second our Guru, especially the revered Guru. If we continuously and sincerely pray to him, then the unwavering faith of a devoted disciple and the power of a Guru who possesses blessings, when these causes and conditions come together, one will definitely recognize the nature of mind. This is what Nyosho Lungtok told Khenpo Achang, especially since there is such a karmic connection between us because the disciple has great respect for the Guru, and the Guru, with special compassion, accepts the disciple. They have this kind of special karmic connection. With this, a very special connection, our relationship becomes unique. The Dharma we receive in our own continuum is also unique. If there is absolutely no bond of faith, this situation is like some professors in the secular Western world. They just keep on talking and talking endlessly. The students below listen patiently, absorbing every word. But after class, it doesn't really matter to anyone. They just completely ignore each other all the time. This kind of situation is just an exchange of theory. But in Buddhism, we have even more than that, a profound and deep kind of karmic connection, a truly meaningful communication of unwavering faith. I sincerely hope that every one of us, when we attend teachings in front of our Khenpo or Khenmo, no matter what kind of teaching it is, whether you are studying the profound Abhidharma or the intricate Madhyamaka or Buddhist logic, you should truly treat this esteemed Dharma teacher as if they were a true Buddha. Perhaps in your mind stream, even if you study Buddhist logic, Madhyamaka or Vinaya, you will still receive the blessings of their mind-to-mind transmission. If there is no such close karmic connection between teacher and student, if this kind of intimate karmic relationship does not exist, even if you receive the supreme direct pointing of Dzogchen, your mind stream may not necessarily be nourished. If your mind stream is not nourished, then these theoretical exchanges, I think, exist in any worldly school and are not particularly rare or precious. So we should frequently, toward our lineage masters and toward all those with whom we have formed a Dharma connection, regardless of whether it is in Buddhist logic, Madhyamaka or Vajrayana, all of these Dharma teachers, if we have this kind of sincere devotion and respect, then in a very short time our own mind stream will undergo a transformation that is quite different from before. All right, we'll stop here for now. That's truly the end of today's teaching.
Bandharangara Padma Sodargye